The history of the Japanese samurai is far more complex than it first appears, often romanticized through the lens of unwavering devotion and martial purity. We picture them as stoic warriors, pillars of honor, embodying the strict, almost sacred code of Bushido, their loyalty absolute, their courage boundless in the face of death. Theirs was a meticulously disciplined world, where the way of the warrior dictated every action, from the ritualistic preparation of their swords to the honorable act of seppuku. Even in the turbulent era of great wars, the Sengoku Jidai, a century and a half of relentless conflict, unspoken rules and boundaries persisted, a fragile etiquette of engagement that, surprisingly, often governed the conduct of even the most brutal campaigns. Powerful clans like the Oda, Takeda, Uesugi, and Hojo battled fiercely, meticulously refining their martial arts, their strategic acumen, and their intricate logistical networks. Yet, despite this constant state of internecine warfare, they were bound by intricate webs of fealty and tradition, a shared understanding of what constituted a proper war. However, even in this brutal age, where betrayal was a common currency, a man emerged whose ruthlessness and cunning transcended all conceivable limits. He did not merely break oaths, he shattered the very foundations of trust, sowing panic and terror even among those who stood at the pinnacle of power, utterly disregarding the unspoken rules of engagement that others, no matter how ruthless, still acknowledged. Against the chaotic backdrop of a fractured Japan, where the Ashikaga shogunate had long lost its former might, reduced to a mere symbolic figurehead, and provincial daimyo wrestled for every scrap of land, resource, and political influence, a shadow began to coalesce. This was a period defined by Gekko Kujo, the low overthrowing the high. But even within this tumultuous concept, there were perceived boundaries. We speak not of a field commander whose valor or cruelty was confined to the bloody battlefield, whose conquests were measured in territory gained or enemies vanquished by force. Rather, we speak of an entity that operated behind the scenes like a slow-acting poison, silently corroding the very structure of authority and loyalty from within. This figure was a true master of intrigue, capable of shifting allegiances faster than the wind changed direction, leveraging deception and manipulation with unparalleled skill. He eliminated without hesitation anyone who stood in his path to boundless power, not always with a sword, but often with a whisper, a forged document, or a strategically placed lie that turned allies into enemies. He was the one who dared to lay hands on what seemed inviolable, on the very symbols of authority and spiritual reverence, and his actions were so shocking that they surpassed even the grim standards of the Sengoku Jidai. Picture a daimyo who, despite all his military strength and the loyalty of his immediate retainers, lay down each night with the chilling thought that this man could undermine his authority from within, turning his own trusted vassals and even his family against him through insidious means. His methods bore no resemblance to an honorable duel or a straightforward siege. This was a war of treachery, manipulation, and complete disregard for any laws of honor or even basic human decency. He was a phantom, able to appear from nowhere and strike from behind, not just with physical force, but with a psychological terror that made even the most influential courtiers, and yes, the shoguns themselves, tremble with fear. This destructive force, whose name was whispered with horror and contempt in the opulent palaces of the feudal lords and across the ancient capital of Kyoto, was not a nameless shadow. It had a name that became synonymous with absolute betrayal and unbridled ruthlessness: Matsunaga Hisahide. Matsunaga Hisahide, born in 1508 into a relatively modest samurai family in what is now Kyoto, a city then reeling from constant conflict and the decline of central authority, managed to ascend to the zenith of power in the Sengoku Jidai. His rise was not through inherited status, for his family held no significant hereditary lands or influence, nor through the leadership of a large, formidable personal army. Instead, he achieved his extraordinary climb by employing his razor-sharp intellect, his strategic genius, and, above all, a complete absence of moral principles. He was the embodiment of the man of treachery, a Machiavellian figure who would put expediency above all else. His career was a relentless succession of perfidious acts. He began his ascent through the ranks as a trusted retainer to the powerful Miyoshi Nagayoshi, also known as Chokei, a prominent daimyo who controlled large swaths of Kinai, the home provinces, and wielded immense influence over the crumbling Ashikaga shogunate. Matsunaga quickly became a key figure at the imperial court in Kyoto, leveraging the Miyoshi clan's pervasive influence over the shogunate to his own advantage. However, the mysterious and conveniently timed deaths of Nagayoshi's three brothers, Soi, Kazumasa, and Masanaga, and then his promising heir, Yoshioki, between 1561 and 1564, created a vacuum of power within the Miyoshi clan. While never definitively proven to be Hisahide's doing, these deaths certainly paved his path to greater power, creating an unsettling aura of suspicion around his rapid ascent and solidifying his reputation as a master schemer who would remove any obstacle, living or otherwise. His most shocking act came in 1565, when, along with the Miyoshi Triumvirs, a faction of ambitious Miyoshi retainers who had broken away from Nagayoshi's successor, he directly attacked the residence of Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiteru, known for his martial prowess and efforts to restore shogunal authority. The Nijo Gosho, Shogun's palace, was besieged, and Yoshiteru, putting up a valiant last stand that earned him the moniker Sword Shogun, was eventually overwhelmed and forced to commit seppuku. This act of assassinating the head of state, the very symbolic leader of Japan, was an unprecedented affront to authority, a profound violation of the established order, sending shockwaves across the entire nation. But his malevolence did not stop there. In 1567, during his ongoing struggle with the Miyoshi clan and other rivals for control of Yamato province, Hisahide's forces, in a display of calculated ruthlessness and disregard for sacred artifacts, set fire to the Great Buddha Hall of Todaiji in Nara. This devastating act severely damaged the iconic Great Buddha statue, causing its head to fall off, an act widely perceived as an unforgivable sacrilege, an act of unholy vandalism that forever cemented Matsunaga's reputation as a godless destroyer, a man who would defile even the most revered spiritual symbols for strategic gain. His cruelty was even attributed to his own family by contemporaries, though no reliable records of him executing relatives for even minor transgressions have been preserved, fueling the legend of his unparalleled ruthlessness. Yet Matsunaga was no mere brutish barbarian, driven by primal instincts. Contrary to the archetypal villain he became in later Edo period plays and popular culture, historical records suggest he was a tall, handsome man, highly educated, and a fervent patron of the arts, particularly the tea ceremony. He pursued cultural refinement with the same intensity he pursued power. He amassed a collection of exquisite tea utensils known as mibutsu, which he cherished above all else, often valuing them more than provincial territories. Legends abound about his most prized possession, the hiragumo, flat spider, tea kettle, a truly legendary chawan. Even Oda Nobunaga, known as the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven for his own ruthless ambition and his intolerance of opposition, displayed an astonishing degree of patience with Matsunaga, repeatedly forgiving his betrayals and allowing him to switch allegiances multiple times. This forbearance speaks volumes about Hisahide's unique blend of danger and utility, or perhaps about Nobunaga's own twisted respect for his audacity and cunning, seeing in Hisahide a dark reflection of his own drive for power. For a man like Nobunaga, who tolerated no rivals and whose wrath was legendary, Hisahide was an infuriating enigma, too dangerous to ignore, yet too useful as a source of intelligence, a disruptor of rivals, or a temporary ally, to simply discard until his final, ultimate defiance. The true strength of Matsunaga Hisahide lay not in his military might, for he never commanded armies on the scale of a Nobunaga or Takeda Shingen, but in his unparalleled capacity for intrigue, manipulation, and strategic betrayal. He did not seek glory on the battlefield, preferring instead to undermine his enemies from within, exploiting their weaknesses, their internal divisions, and their miscalculations. His weapons were not the katana or yari, but lies, deception, bribery, carefully planted rumors, and ruthless opportunism. He was a master of psychological warfare, forcing his adversaries to live in constant dread of his next unpredictable betrayal, never knowing whom to trust or when the ground beneath them would crumble. Matsunaga was a living refutation of the idealized samurai code, a stark proof that in the raw chaos of the Sengoku Jidai, survival and ascent belonged not to the most noble or honorable, but to the most cunning, the most pragmatic, and the most ruthless. He was feared not simply as a strong warrior, but as a man who recognized no rules, whose ambition knew no bounds, and who was willing to commit any crime, however heinous, for power. Matsunaga Hisahide's end came when he dared, for the final time, to betray Oda Nobunaga, one of Japan's great unifiers, by siding with the anti-Nobunaga coalition. Besieged in his formidable Shigi castle, he faced his ultimate demise, trapped by the relentless forces of Nobunaga's generals. But even in death, his unique, dark nature manifested in a theatrical flourish. When Nobunaga demanded his head as proof of his defeat, and the fabled Hiragumo tea kettle as a spoil of war, Matsunaga, unwilling to surrender his most cherished treasure or face the humiliation of capture, famously smashed the kettle, destroying it forever. Then, in a final act of defiant grandiosity, he sealed his fate. According to some accounts, he had the castle's main tower vault, where he had retreated, rigged with gunpowder, choosing fiery oblivion over capture. As he committed seppuku, the tower exploded around him, ensuring that not even his remains would fall into Nobunaga's hands, a defiant final gesture against the man who had shown him more patience than any other. Matsunaga left behind no lasting dynasty or great administrative achievements. His life was a testament to the pursuit of power for its own sake, not for nation-building. His legacy is of a different, more chilling kind. He became the quintessential symbol of absolute betrayal and ruthless ambition in the Sengoku Jidai. His story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkest aspects of human nature, and how far ambition can go in the complete absence of moral constraints. The burnt remains of Todaiji and the dramatic legend of the exploding tea kettle remain powerful, unsettling symbols of a man who dared to defy all conventions and, in a sense, surpassed the very cruelty of his age. Yet it is crucial to remember that his image as a uniformly evil figure was largely shaped by the victors and by foreign missionaries, who naturally painted their adversaries in the darkest hues to justify their own narratives. The fact that this villain was an educated patron of the arts, a connoisseur of beauty, and that his humble grave lies largely unnoticed at Darumaji Temple adds a layer of complexity to his terrifying legend. He was a nightmare for the rational mind, an unpredictable force, but also a vivid testament to how wild, paradoxical, and utterly unpredictable the path to power could be in Japan's age of warring provinces.